Good morning. This is a surprise broadcast from your friend Paul Wilbur. Yes, tonight will be Shabbat in your home, and right now I'm sitting in a hotel room in Springfield, Missouri, just outside Springfield, Missouri, but I didn't want to let yesterday's Holocaust Remembrance Day go by without speaking with you today. I didn't announce this, and yesterday I was flying on a bunch of airplanes, and we arrived late and got packed in, and here we are. So I won't probably be commenting on some of you. I see your familiar names coming up on my screen. It's so good to have you with me here today. Some of you are keyed in, so when I do these surprise things, it shows up on your communication device and says, uh-oh, he's on again. So thanks for joining me. Just a couple of moments. I felt it was important for us to share together today. Yesterday was the 77th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. Concentration camp is what it's called. Of course, it was a death camp. And we still have with us a few precious souls that were saved out of those terrible years of the Nazi Holocaust. But there are so many these days who are calling for silence, and hasn't there been enough time? Do we need to actually speak about it? Should we remember it? Well, you know the famous statement that is spoken about the Holocaust by those who care, including Israel: never again. But if we continue to use the phrase never again, and then the next generation doesn't understand what we're speaking about, it has little power or little authority. Today I'm sitting in this hotel room in Republic, Missouri, just outside of Springfield. Tonight we're doing 24 hours of praise, worship, and ministry and prayer here at Destiny Church with my good friend Pastor Chad Blansett, who also wants to be involved. He wants his people to know. A wonderful church here in Missouri, reaching out to the nations, but now they want to be much more closely tied in with kingdom and with what is happening with our Jewish people and what our Jewish king is thinking about. Yesterday on the plane, I saw a short post by one of my dear friends, also happens to be on my board of directors, Scott Volk of Together for Israel. He mentioned a book entitled Where Birds Never Sing. I was really provoked by it, so on the plane I downloaded this book, and I read particularly the segment about just one man's account being a part of the American Standing Army that had the privilege and the sorrow of liberating Auschwitz death camp. He goes into pretty graphic detail about what he saw. Of course, it's impossible to read these kinds of accounts and not have your heart pierced with the absolute brutality. No, it goes beyond. The manifest demonic activity of the hatred of hell for the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and his people, which, if you are a believer in Jesus and Yeshua, includes you. He hates you exactly the same. But it took me back as I was reading the portions of that book, it took me back 2 years as 70 pastors and their wives, excuse me, and myself, my wife, Nathan, and his wife, Malky, were a part of a team that led 70 pastors from 14 nations to tour and pray and take communion at Auschwitz-Birkenau death camp outside of Warsaw, Poland. Isn't it interesting that these days even the Polish government has passed a law that you're not allowed to talk about the Polish death camps. You can talk about the death camps, but you have to leave out the determiner Polish. They don't want to take any responsibility for what happened, even though in Poland, some blatant demonic anti-Semites went from house to house of their neighbors and killed their Jewish neighbors. Poland was the site of terrible, terrible atrocities. You can't even put wartime atrocities as a part of it because it was so demonic and so enthusiastically enjoined. So today, it's important, yes, that we remember. It's important that we pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Just these last couple of days, a large winter storm blew across the northern portion of Israel and laid a thick blanket of snow on Mount Hermon, brought rain and wind into Tel Aviv. And it's important. Why? Because it's a high desert area, Israel. And the snow and the rain brings life-giving H2O to that beloved piece of property. So today, even though it's the day after, I want to remind us it's good to remember, it's good to pray, it's good to not be silent, it's good to lift up our voice and to declare never again. 2 years ago, as we visited Auschwitz, we went during the festival of Purim, the great celebration of when Esther and Mordecai lifted up their voices in ancient Persia and saved an entire nation from the destruction of the evil Haman. Interesting to me that when we left that place, I didn't sing for 6 months. My voice, my vocal cords were burned. My throat was blistered and red. You've heard me tell the story before. And it was months and months later that a doctor confirmed that and said, well, of course you can't sing. And then when I read that book yesterday about the liberation of Auschwitz, the title of the book, Where Birds Never Sing, I'll warn you that the language prior, this one man's story of how he enjoined in World War II, drafted as a young man from Italian descent, joined the army, and then was part of a liberating army on that day in 1945, January 27th, the day that we remember the liberation of Auschwitz, and his depiction of what he saw and heard is quite graphic. So if you're going to join and read some of the portions of that book, I'll just warn you that it's army language, and his depiction of what he saw and even felt is deeply disturbing. So, with a footnote. Interesting, though, that the name of his book, Where Birds Never Sing, and as I left that place 2 years ago, I didn't sing for 6 months. Still find it difficult. We had a German pastor with us, a dear friend, Jobst Bittner, who, as a very large part of his life, story, and his church history and the membership, have taken upon themselves to take responsibility, even though they weren't alive during those dreadful years, and making some kind of spiritual and natural reparations for what took place in their country as a part of being a German. They are bold, and it takes quite a bit of spiritual acumen and a sense of responsibility, but courage to stand up in a country that simply wants to sweep these things away, to be done with it. Although Germany has made great strides in taking responsibility and making wartime reparations, although how can you restore when an entire family is lost save one? Most of the survivors, and I've known several, most of them, even the very youngest, are in their 80s now. We are losing their testimony of this people that witnessed and experienced firsthand the very horrors of hell. Some of them still suffer today, even as they survive in Israel, for a lack of good food, of enough money to pay for clothing and comfortable surroundings, to pay for their heat in the winter. And I want to encourage you, there are ministries that specialize here. Our friends at Jewish Voice, Jonathan Burness, very involved. If you want to know more, you can write to us, wilburministries.com, and we can recommend to you. Of course, we're spending additional time in the lost tribes, lost Israel, particularly in the African Lemba. There are some in northern India, but we're focusing right now, as you know, on supporting the poorest of the poor of Israel, our black African Lemba Jewish community, many of which are turning to Yeshua as Messiah and King. Join us today if you would like as a world partner. You can click on the description here on the page and join us as a world partner. In the next couple of days, we'll be continuing to raise support to continue to drill clean water wells and preparing a nourishing, warm meal for every Lemba Jewish child. School will begin now in just a week. It's a rainy season there, and this is just a part of doing our part. You know, Jacob, the brother of Yeshua, known as James, said that religion that God approves of is to take care of orphans and widows in their distress. And then, of course, in Matthew 25, Yeshua himself says, "What you've done for the least of these, my brothers, you've done it for me." During this time, the special time as we remember the liberation of that terrible dungeon called Auschwitz, that we can be a part of the solution. Yes, praying is good, but as we open up our eyes and see, open up our hearts to understand, then we should also open up our hands and be a part of the solution, of the grace of God to a people that have been chased from nation to nation to nation, and yet under the blessing and the love of God. Certainly as believers in Yeshua, believers in Messiah, we should be the first to step out and say, yes, this happened. We will never forget. But yes, we also want to be a part of the solution. We love you, and here's the proof. Join me today, if you will, as we feed, nourish, care for, love, and continue to comfort Israel wherever we find her, scattered in the nations, and especially in the land of Israel. You're such great people. I love seeing your names, and even in Spanish, Cesar, I see you. Bendición. Yes. Well, I'm reading some of your comments. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for being a part of the solution. Would you do that today? Click on the description here. Join us as a world partner. We will be going now the end of this month of, February as it comes up. We have plans to make our way to Zimbabwe to see, touch, feel, hear, comfort, nourish, drill clean water wells, provide food. The country has just opened, and we are comforting scattered Israel wherever we find her. Yes, at our home in Jacksonville, but also halfway around the world in Africa and Israel, as together we make a difference, changing the way the world worships. Never forget, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Open up our eyes, our hearts, and our hands, and together we are making a difference. Thanks so much for joining me on this special ad hoc. I wish you all Shabbat Shalom as you gather around the globe, your family and friends, to gather into a warm, comfortable place, sharing delicious, nourishing food, thanking God for his blessings. Remember that they're of the house of Israel who do not enjoy the same comforts on this special day, on this Shabbat. Keep us in prayer as we minister this weekend. Tonight, starting 24 hours in Republic, Missouri, just outside of Springfield, all day, 24 hours. And then tomorrow night with more hours of worship and prayer. Then I'll be ministering Sunday at Destiny Church, 2 services. Pastor has asked me to minister on the blessings of Shabbat. Yes, it's amazing. Our voices are being heard. And there is an emerging church. There is a kingdom that continues to grow here on earth, whose desire is to express on earth as it is in heaven, without restraint, being bold and courageous, to demonstrate not only in ourselves, not only the confidence that he's made a place for us, but also to share that with the world, to see his kingdom come and his will being done in us, in our homes, in our communities of faith, in our nations, and in the world, until that glorious day when we hear 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, the shout of the angel of the Lord, the blast of that shofar, not from a sanctuary here, but from the heavenlies, the voice of God. And those who have fallen asleep in Messiah rise first. Then we are together, caught up together with them in the clouds, return with him to celebrate 1,000-year reign on earth from Jerusalem, the King of all kings. Friends, this is not just a children's bedtime story. This is a real event that is preparing to happen. I'm believing, even in my own lifetime, even in my own natural eyes, will see it happen. So until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you, be gracious unto you, lift up his countenance upon you, and give you his peace. Thank you so much. God bless you. Have a wonderful Shabbat with family and friends. And let's remember, even this Shabbat of the amazing, amazing demonstration of heaven here on this earth. God bless you, and Shabbat Shalom.